Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be reviewing the performance of number 68, Melker Karlsson, the second to last player I will be reviewing this offseason. So Karlsson had a pretty much average year if you don't take into account the fact that he is on a $2 million contract, which is certainly way too much for a player of Melker Karlsson's caliber. It is around what you would expect from a fourth liner making $900,000, but a fourth liner nonetheless. His frequent line mates during the regular season were himself with Goodrow, which was a very, very common fourth-line duo, as well as Lukáš Radil, a player who got just enough games here in the regular season to really make that the most frequent one, although it was only by a couple of percentage points. And in the playoffs, the most frequent fourth line was actually himself and Goodrow with Michael Haley. In the regular season, Melker Karlsson played almost every single game, playing a grand total of 79, 12 goals, which is actually pretty good for a fourth liner, although that only comes with 4 assists for a total of 16 points, which falls into around where a fourth liner might land, maybe a bit lower than where you would expect, especially for a year where scoring was up somewhat all around the league. He was also a -1, which a plus-minus that isn't great for more of the top-end players of your team because they're normally coming in on the ice and double shifting and everything like that. When it comes to a fourth liner, though, I would say it's a bit more of a solid stat, as the fourth liner is normally just going to find himself on the fourth line. And one of the big things when it comes to a fourth line in the NHL is you want them to be able to produce more than they give up. And Karlsson was just barely under that, so it's not like -1 is some horrible stat for him, but it's also not that great and shows again that he was quite average this season. His penalty minutes of around 26 also say the same thing, not too high, but also not that low. Time on ice of 11.5 minutes. A minute and a half of that just about are shorthanded ice time, as of course Melker Karlsson is one of the two main duos shorthanded wise for the San Jose Sharks, him and Barclay Goodrow, and then of course Couture and Tomas Hertl. So when it comes to his even strength ice time, he got just about 10 minutes per game, which is again quite average. In the playoffs, he played every single game, all 20 of them, 0 goals. Compared to the 12 he got in the regular season, which was somewhat disappointing, and as well as only 2 assists for 2 points. And a point that I brought up in other fourth-liner videos is that you take a look at the two teams that made it to the Stanley Cup Finals, the Boston Bruins and the St. Louis Blues. Both of their fourth lines, the St. Louis Blues especially with Barbashev, Sundqvist. This was a line that was able to score, I think it was 4 or 5 games in a row against the San Jose Sharks during the playoffs. And you take a look at the Boston Bruins, who are having players like Kuraly and Achari on their fourth line that are also producing quite heavily. And then you take a look at the Sharks, you've got Goodrow, who had those 2 really good games in Game 5 against Game 7 against the Golden Knights, getting those 2 game winners, but was otherwise basically invisible. Same with Melker Karlsson, only 2 assists through the 20 games. And it shows that a fourth line, while it's not obviously the most important thing, you got to get your defense covered and your goaltending and your top lines, it is still quite important to trying to make a deep run. It's why it's no coincidence that the 2 teams that made it to the Stanley Cup Finals had solid fourth lines, and the Sharks just didn't really get that from theirs. He was also a -2, again showing that he was giving up more goals than he was getting for his team. Penalty minutes of 4, really nothing, no big deal there. And his time on ice was actually 11 minutes and 38 seconds, so only an 8-second jump from the regular season. And the interesting thing about that time on ice is that his shorthanded time on ice actually went up a good 20 seconds. It was his even strength ice time that actually fell from regular season to playoffs, which is pretty surprising when you think about it, not only because there are overtimes in the regular season that extend the amount of even strength ice time that there can be available in a specific game, sometimes by 20 or even 30 minutes, but also because in the playoffs, the refs are much less likely to call penalties, and so there is more even strength ice time to go around. So you would expect most players would go up in even strength ice time, but the fact that Karlsson dropped down a bit goes to show that even if he is a decent choice defensively when it comes to short-handed, it wasn't something DeBoer liked to go with a lot, unlike when you looked at the St. Louis Blues and the Boston Bruins, who could sometimes match up their fourth line even against other teams' second line and not be too worried. The Sharks didn't necessarily have that luxury. So for his grades on the year, first quarter he got a C-. It was not a very good first quarter. The second quarter was better with a B-. Then the third and fourth quarter both getting a C+, and the playoffs just about an average C, which gives his final grade of a C. As I said, very average season for Melker Karlsson. If you don't take into account his contract, it's just about in line of what you would expect from the average fourth liner. But if the Sharks want to be a really successful team, they're going to need to get a lot more from their fourth line to not just be average, but be near the tops of the league. And I don't know if Melker Karlsson has the possibility of doing that. We'll see. Maybe with better supporting players, i.e. not Michael Haley, it'll be a possibility. Class dismissed.